"You're taking all 600. The factory manager looked past the boy and toward the old pickup parked beside the loading dock. Its rear tires were already low. One headlight was cloudy. A rope held the tailgate shut. Malik Carter nodded. "All of them?" The manager slowly removed his safety glasses. Behind him, the factory floor was quiet for the first time in 32 years. No saws, no forklifts, no men shouting over machines. Just rain tapping the metal roof and 600 wooden crates stacked in uneven towers beneath the loading shelter. Some were cracked, some had broken lids, many were stained with oil, paint, and years of dust. Every crate had the same black mark sprayed across one side, rejected. The manager looked at Malik again. The boy was 16, thin, dark-skinned, wearing a brown work coat that had once belonged to his father. The sleeves were folded twice at the wrists, but they still covered part of his hands. "You understand these aren't furniture crates," the manager said. "They carried machine parts. Some of them are 20 years old." Malik placed one hand on the nearest crate. The wood was rough beneath his fingers. "I know, and most of them can't be reused." Malik looked at the long rows disappearing into the shadows. "I know that too." The manager waited for him to explain. Malik did not. That was the first thing people noticed about Malik Carter. He rarely spoke when silence could do the work for him. The manager released a tired breath and looked at the disposal estimate clipped to his board. The company had been ordered to clear the property before the end of the month. A waste contractor wanted $9,000 to haul the crates away and break them down. $9,000 to remove wood nobody wanted. Malik had offered to do it for free. The manager held out a paper. "Your mother needs to sign this." "She's working." "Then come back when she is." "She won't be home until morning." "That sounds like tomorrow's problem." Malik's eyes moved toward the crates. Tomorrow was not something his family had much of. Their landlord had given them 11 days. 11 days to pay 2 months of rent or leave the small house at the end of Grayson Street. Malik's mother worked nights cleaning patient rooms at St. Anne's Hospital. She never complained. She came home smelling of disinfectant, cooked breakfast, slept 4 hours, and went back again. But 3 weeks earlier, she had placed an eviction notice inside the kitchen drawer. She had not hidden it well. Malik had found it beneath a stack of unpaid power bills. The paper was still there, folded twice. Waiting, he looked at the factory manager. "Can I load the first 40 while I wait for her signature?" The manager laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because he could not understand why a boy would ask to begin carrying 600 broken crates before he even had permission to take them. "You think those things are going to save you?" Malik looked down at the black words stamped on the wood. Rejected. "No, sir." He slipped his fingers beneath the edge of the crate and lifted. "I think I'm going to save them." The first crate was heavier than it looked. Malik dragged it to the edge of the dock, lowered one end onto the pickup, then pushed until the wood scraped across the metal bed. The noise echoed through the empty factory. By the 5th crate, rain had darkened his hair. By the 12th, one of his palms had opened. A thin line of blood ran across the wood. He wiped it on his jeans and kept working. At 6 in the evening, the hospital's night shift began. At 7, Malik was still loading. At 8, the manager locked the main doors and went home. He left the loading light on. Malik worked alone beneath it. The yellow bulb swung whenever the wind passed under the shelter, moving shadows across the towers of crates. At 9:30, a city bus stopped at the corner. Malik's mother stepped down wearing blue hospital scrubs beneath a long gray coat. Her name was Denise Carter. She was 39 years old, though the tired skin beneath her eyes made strangers guess older. She stood in the rain with one hand holding her work bag. For several seconds she said nothing. Then she looked at the pickup, then at the factory, then at her son. "Malik," he stopped moving. There were 27 crates on the truck. "What did you do?" "I need your signature." "That is not what I asked." He climbed down from the loading dock and handed her the release form. She did not take it. The rain ran from the paper onto his fingers. "What are those crates?" "I can see that." The factory is throwing them away. Her eyes moved across the stacks. How many? 600. Denise closed her eyes, not in anger, in exhaustion. She had been awake for 18 hours. Malik, we do not have room for 600 crates. We have the empty lot behind the house. We do not own that lot. Nobody uses it. That does not make it ours. He waited. She opened her eyes again. What are you planning to do with them? Malik reached into his coat and removed a small piece of wood. It was no bigger than his hand. One edge had been sanded smooth. 3 narrow cuts ran across the surface, each one made at a different angle. His mother stared at it. For the last 2 weeks, Malik had been visiting the factory after school, not inside, just near the fence, watching trucks leave and workers carry old equipment out. 4 days earlier, he had found a broken crate panel beside the road. He had taken it home. Under the gray surface, beneath the oil and dirt, the wood had a tight golden grain, not pine, not cheap packing wood. Hard maple. The kind furniture makers paid real money for. But that was not the part Malik could not stop thinking about. Pressed into the underside of the board were 6 small holes in a perfect row. They were not random. They were part of something the factory had once used the crates to protect. Something his father had drawn years before in a notebook Malik was not supposed to have. Denise finally took the release paper. Her eyes stopped on the name of the factory, Bellwether Precision Works. Her fingers tightened. Your father worked here. Malik looked toward the dark building. I know. He told you to stay away from this place. He told me that before he died. Denise lowered the paper. The loading light moved slowly above them. What did you find? Malik looked at the small holes in the piece of maple. Then he looked at the 600 crates waiting under the roof. I'm not sure yet. That was not completely true. He had an idea, but ideas were cheap. His father had taught him that. What mattered was whether the wood would hold weight, whether the joints would lock, whether 600 crates could become something no one in the city had ever built before, and whether he could finish it in 11 days. Denise signed the paper against the hood of the truck. Then she handed him the pen. You have until the landlord comes. Malik folded the release and placed it inside his coat. His mother turned toward the bus stop. He watched her walk away through the rain. Then he climbed back onto the loading dock, wrapped a cloth around his bleeding palm, and lifted crate number 28. The first truckload barely fit through the narrow gate behind the Carter house. The empty lot looked larger from the street than it did up close. Tall weeds reached almost to Malik's knees. Broken fence posts leaned toward the alley. Someone had dumped an old washing machine near the back corner years ago, and blackberry vines had slowly swallowed half of it. Malik shut off the engine. For a long moment, he simply looked at the crates, 28 of them. 572 still waited at the factory. The numbers felt impossible. He climbed into the truck bed and studied the wood more carefully than he had before. Every crate looked damaged from a distance, but up close the story changed. Most of the broken boards had cracked around the nails, not through the grain itself. The maple underneath was still solid. His father used to say the same thing about people. Don't judge the crack, find out what broke around it. Malik hadn't heard those words in almost 3 years, yet they returned as clearly as if his father were standing beside him. He picked up a hammer, 1 nail at a time, no rushing. The first board came free without splitting, then another, then another. By midnight, 1 crate had become a neat stack of usable boards. His hands were shaking from the cold. Not once had he smiled, not because he wasn't hopeful. Because he refused to celebrate before proving himself right. The next afternoon, school ended at 3. Most students hurried toward buses or the basketball court. Malik walked in the opposite direction, carrying an old canvas backpack that looked far too heavy for the books inside. A voice called after him. Still collecting trash? It was Jason, one of the football players. 3 others laughed before Malik even turned around. I heard your backyard looks like a dump now. Another boy grinned. You building a tree house or something? Malik adjusted the backpack on his shoulder. Neither anger nor embarrassment showed on his face. He simply kept walking. One of the boys shook his head. I swear that kid never talks. Maybe he didn't, but silence had become cheaper than arguments. At home, Denise had already left for another shift at the hospital. A note rested on the kitchen table. "Dinner is in the oven. Don't stay outside too late. Love, Mom." Malik folded the paper carefully and slipped it into the same notebook where he kept every drawing his father had ever made. The notebook was old. Its corners had rounded from years of use. Grease stains covered several pages. Most people would have thrown it away. Malik never would. Inside were rough sketches of workbenches, shelves, wooden joints, storage racks, and handwritten measurements. His father had never been an engineer, just a maintenance mechanic at Bellwether Precision Works. But every evening after work, he drew things that could be built better than the ones he repaired all day. He had always said the same sentence before closing the notebook. "Good ideas don't arrive finished. They grow one mistake at a time." Malik opened to the final page. Half of one drawing had been torn away. Only the bottom remained, 6 evenly spaced circles, the exact same spacing he had found beneath the crate board. He ran his finger across the faded pencil marks. It couldn't be a coincidence. Could it? For the next 4 days, life settled into a routine that left almost no room for sleep. School, factory, pickup truck, unload crates, dinner, take apart wood until midnight, repeat. Each evening another mountain of crates appeared behind the house. Neighbors slowed their cars just to stare. One woman whispered to another while walking her dog, "They're turning that place into a junkyard." An older man knocked on Denise's front door. "You planning on cleaning this up?" She forced a tired smile. "My son has a plan." The man glanced toward hundreds of stacked crates. "I hope it's a good one." "So do I." After he left, Denise stood alone on the porch. She watched Malik measuring boards beneath a hanging work light. He had not asked for help once, not because he didn't need it, because he knew everyone around him already carried enough weight. On the 6th evening, something finally happened. Malik removed the floor from another crate. A folded sheet of paper slipped out from beneath one of the support beams. He froze. The paper wasn't part of the wood. Someone had hidden it there, carefully. He unfolded it. Most of the ink had faded, but one corner still carried the Bellwether Company logo. It wasn't a shipping record. It wasn't an invoice. It was a machining diagram. Rows of measurements filled the page. Small circles, precise angles, assembly notes. At the bottom, one handwritten sentence had been added with blue ink. "Prototype never approved." Malik read it twice. Then a third time, his heartbeat slowed instead of racing, because suddenly, the holes in the crate boards, the notebook, and these discarded crates were no longer separate mysteries. Somewhere inside 600 rejected crates, someone had accidentally left behind the pieces of an unfinished idea. And for the first time since the factory closed, Malik wasn't wondering whether the crates had value. He was wondering who had tried to hide it. The next morning, Malik carried the faded blueprint to the town library. The paper was fragile. He placed it on the librarian's desk as carefully as if it were made of glass. "Can this be copied?" he asked. The librarian adjusted her glasses and looked at the Bellwether logo. "I haven't seen this name in years." She disappeared into the back room and returned with 3 thick binders filled with old newspaper records. One article caught Malik's eye. "Bellwether wins National Award for Modular Storage System." The article was 24 years old. It described a storage system strong enough to hold heavy industrial equipment while using less wood than traditional shelving. The design was praised, but one sentence near the bottom stood out. "The second-generation prototype was never released after the factory changed ownership." Malik quietly folded the newspaper. The blueprint wasn't random. It belonged to an unfinished invention. That afternoon, he carried several cleaned maple boards into the garage. His father's old toolbox waited beneath the workbench. Rust covered most of the wrenches, but the hand plane still worked. He measured twice, cut once. The first pieces fit together almost perfectly, almost. As soon as he placed a heavy toolbox on top, the frame twisted and collapsed. The wood hit the floor with a loud crack. Malik stood still. Then he picked up the broken pieces. His father had always said, Broken wood teaches faster than perfect wood. He started again. 3 days later, the second version held twice the weight. The third version held even more. By the fourth attempt, Malik had built a simple modular storage rack that locked together without screws. Each section could be stacked, moved, or repaired using only wooden joints. It was stronger than anything sold at the local hardware store. For the first time, he allowed himself a small smile. Until rain arrived. Water leaked through the garage roof all night. The unfinished racks swelled. Several joints warped beyond repair. Nearly a week's work was ruined before sunrise. Malik sat on the garage floor staring at the damaged wood. His notebook lay open beside him. For a long time, he didn't touch either one. Then his mother quietly entered with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. She looked at the ruined racks. "I guess it didn't work." Malik shook his head. "It worked." He pointed toward one corner. "It just wasn't ready for the weather." She smiled softly. "Then neither are you." He looked at her. "But you keep showing up anyway." The next week, Malik sanded every board again. This time, he sealed each piece with a simple waterproof finish recommended by an old carpenter at the hardware store. It took longer. It cost nearly the last of his savings, but the wood stayed straight. When he finished the first complete rack, he loaded it into the pickup and drove to a weekend farmer's market. People walked past without stopping. Some admired it, none bought it. The afternoon sun began to fall. Malik was preparing to load it back into the truck when an elderly woman stopped. She ran her fingers along the smooth maple. "My husband built furniture," she said quietly. "These joints, nobody makes them like this anymore." She asked one question. "How much?" Malik hesitated. He had never sold anything before. $120, she nodded. "I'll take 2. Malik blinked. "I've only made 1, she smiled. "Then I'll wait for the second." As she drove away, Malik looked at the empty space in the truck where the rack had been. It wasn't a fortune. It wasn't enough to solve every problem. But it was the first time someone had paid for something built with his own hands. And for the first time since the factory closed, those 600 worthless crates no longer looked like a pile of discarded wood. They looked like a future. By the end of the month, every crate behind the Carter house had been opened. The empty lot no longer looked like a junkyard, it looked like a workshop. Stacks of clean maple boards stood under simple wooden shelters. Finished storage racks lined one side of the fence. Sawdust covered the ground where weeds had once grown. Malik had sold 12 racks, then 20, then 34. The money paid the overdue rent. A week later, it paid the electric bill. His mother quietly removed the eviction notice from the kitchen drawer. She didn't throw it away. She folded it once more and placed it inside the old notebook beside her husband's drawings. "Some papers," she whispered, "should remind us how far we've come." Spring arrived with steady orders. A local bakery wanted shelving for its storeroom. A bookstore ordered custom display tables. Then the town library called. The same librarian who had helped Malik with the old blueprint smiled as she walked through the workshop. "I think these belong here," she said. She ordered 6 handcrafted bookshelves. Every piece carried the same quiet detail hidden underneath. 6 small holes, exactly like the ones on the original factory crates. No customer ever noticed. Malik always did. One Monday morning, a white pickup stopped outside the workshop. A man stepped out wearing a Bellwether Precision Works jacket. The factory had been sold. A new company planned to reopen part of the building. The visitor slowly examined the shelves, the workbenches, and the neat stacks of finished wood. Finally, he looked at Malik. "Did you build all of this?" "Yes, sir," the man smiled. "I recognize those joints." Malik stayed silent. "They were designed by an engineer named Samuel Carter." Malik's hands stopped moving. Samuel Carter, his father. The visitor continued. "Your father spent years trying to convince management to replace expensive metal storage systems with these wooden modular designs. They worked, but the project was canceled before production began." He looked around the workshop again. "I guess he was simply ahead of his time." Malik reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded blueprint. The visitor laughed softly. I wondered where that drawing disappeared. A month later, Bellwether offered Malik something no one expected. Not a job. A partnership. The company wanted him to manufacture the modular storage systems using the same design his father had started years earlier, updated with Malik's improvements. The first contract wasn't worth millions, but it was enough to rent a real workshop, enough to hire 2 former factory workers who had lost their jobs when Bellwether closed. Men who had once watched broken crates being thrown into dumpsters were now helping build products from the very same wood. Life had quietly come full circle. On opening day, the factory manager who had signed away the 600 rejected crates walked through the new workshop. He stopped beside a finished storage rack, ran his hand across the smooth maple, then smiled. I remember asking if those crates were going to save you. Malik looked around the busy workshop. Machines hummed. Wood shavings floated through the afternoon light. His mother laughed with 2 employees while pouring coffee into paper cups. Photographs of his father hung above the entrance. Malik smiled. They didn't save me. The manager raised an eyebrow. No, they gave me the chance to save something my father never got to finish. For a moment, neither man spoke. The silence said enough. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Malik walked through the quiet workshop one last time. He stopped beside the very first rack he had ever built, the one with the tiny mistake hidden in the back corner. He never fixed it. It reminded him that every strong thing begins with an imperfect first attempt. He opened his father's notebook, slipped the old blueprint inside, then placed both on the highest shelf in the building, not to hide them. But so every morning before work began, he would remember where everything started, with 600 crates that everyone else had called worthless. Sometimes life doesn't hand us treasure. Sometimes it hands us something everyone else has given up on. The difference isn't in what we receive. It's in what we're willing to see. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more inspiring journeys like this one, I'd love to have you here. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next story.